Hello and welcome to episode 115 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now, as you know, if you've listened to Mark and Me before, I created a project last year called The Voice Behind the Artists. I sat down and I thought to myself, I wanted to take the podcast in a new direction. I've spoken to musicians, I've spoken to bands, I've spoken to film directors and actors, but I wanted to speak to some artists. I'm a huge movies fan and I absolutely adore film art. I love graphic novels, so I thought let's try and do a project called The Voice Behind the Artist, which will give me a chance to speak to some of my favourite artists in the country. I was lucky enough to speak to people like Matt Ferguson, the one and only Paul Shipper, and many more. And this created 5 episode specials which I released to you guys. And the response was absolutely massive. It was incredible and introduced a whole new audience to Mark and Me. This led to me being here today to give you a brand new series of The Voice Behind the Artists, and to launch today's second season is the one and only Doaly. Now, this artist is absolutely amazing. Some of his artwork you'll recognise, especially his Spider-Man work, is just absolutely flawless. So to have the opportunity to sit down with him and talk all about his passion projects growing up, how he got into art, and his most recent work on some of the films like Batman Begins and Jaws, which you know I'd love to talk about, and Star Wars was a dream come true. So what I'm going to do now is get straight to the interview. So here's me and Doaly talking all things art. So Doaly, thanks for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
First of all, what I want to do is for the listeners out there today that might have tuned in for the first time, or someone that hasn't discovered you as an artist yet, I want to take it back right to maybe your childhood or when you were first starting out, maybe at education. And can you remember the point when you really fell in love with pieces of art and thought, this is something that I want to do?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Over the years, you kind of look back and try to piece together where it all kind of started, and there's definite like milestones that I can say like brought this whole journey together.
Right.
I think the earliest memories is me being about between 6 and 8. My parents had a like corner shop, and part of that shop was they used to rent out videos as well. So being the youngest child and having 2 older brothers and sharing a bedroom, they used to plaster the walls with movie posters. That was basically every inch of the walls were covered with movie posters, and me being the youngest, not being always allowed to watch certain films, I used to like look at the posters and kind of make up my own stories. So at the age of around 8, I remember this quite vividly. It's like on one wall I had Back to the Future poster, and the other walls I had Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. There was Police Academy, The Hills Have Eyes, Nightmare on Elm Street. So that was really my childhood of art in a sense. I used to sit on the bed and like my nose would be like an inch away from the poster, and I used to like study every brush stroke that was there. And it's like I quickly learned like this was actually a painted poster and not just photography in a lot of cases. And it's one of those first like things was like I'd be there kind of reverse engineering it in my head. It's like how was all this put together, still being like 8 years old, and all I ever did at that age was draw, to be honest. And the funniest thing I still remember is like realizing like Drew Struzan's signature was on 2 of those posters, and in my head it was like how those 2 posters connected. I didn't necessarily piece together that was the artist's signature, but it was on Temple of Doom and it was on Back to the Future, and it's like, okay, those films must have a connection. And I was reading the credit blocks, trying to piece it together, not realizing directly at that point it's the artist's signature. But yeah, so that was like I think a real like interesting starting point, because the art that I knew was of film at that age, and everything I drew was film orientated. I remember drawing a lot of like Rambo pieces and so forth at the age of 8, and I used to like take that character and dress him up differently. So it'd be like a rabbit, but the rabbit is Rambo. So it was like making up my own characters. But yeah, everything was kind of very much heavily influenced by film.
Yeah.
It was a fun thing. As like as children, you pick up habits and so forth, and drawing and being creative was very much my thing. But then I didn't really follow it on. Like I was always good at art in the sense from junior school and high school. But then for GCSEs, I didn't take art. I took like practical subjects from like geography. I did do design technology and so forth, but like art wasn't like necessarily, okay, here's a career goal. And my parents being like first generation immigrants, they very much instilled a sense of like, go for a more practical subject.
Yeah.
There was no precursor in a sense for like, hey, this is how you make a life in art, or in the creative field. So I totally understand it from that point of view. They want the best for their son, and to have a very um, like work in a field that's definitely going to get you paid and have
Yeah.
progression. And they didn't necessarily see that in, say, the art world, because no one prior to that had done anything like that. So that was the kind of steer from that. So I did my GCSEs, and it was like, okay, did okay, didn't do greatly, to be honest. Then I went back to art. So for A levels, I did art and design. I did a foundation and so forth, and that's where like it really flourished, and I got to do everything I wanted, from photography to graphic design and everything in between. But then I studied multimedia design and never really pushed it any further than that. It wasn't necessarily I was looking for a job in art or illustration, but graphic design was really a passion at that point. And then for 15, I would say 15 to 18 years, my career has been in web design.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point where it's like I'm doing well, and everything's kind of coming together. I've become like a senior in the company and so forth. And then I wanted to do something outside of that was just for me. And I was like, I haven't drawn, in all honesty, at that point, probably for 15 to 12 years. Not at all. Like there's things I'm designing, but I'm not
Yeah.
drawing anything in the normal traditional sense. So I thought, okay, I'll start this up as a thing just for me, just a reward for me in a sense. I really love it and have a passion for it. So I think it was 2012, I started drawing again for fun, outside of work, evenings and weekends. And the main goal really was, not having drawn for so long, was just to, let's get good. Let's like revisit this, this skill that I had, and let's like, brush off the cobwebs and, get better at it.
You were just talking then about your parents and when you're at school. Now, obviously, we've all been there, me myself. It's kind of that whole, look, son, you need to get a proper job. You need to do a proper education, because you're never going to make it as a guitarist or a singer or an artist. It's one of those kind of dreams. But you then said that when you went to college, you went down the whole route of doing graphic design and art. So what was it that changed, do you think? Did you have the backing of your parents at that age when you went to college, or was it trying to convince them, or was it just like, well, I didn't do very well in my GCSEs, so allow me to at least try something I'm passionate about?
Yeah, I think after GCSEs, and it's like when you're a kid at that age, that's like feels like the end of the world.
Yeah.
Even though you look back now, it's a small milestone. They always knew I was a creative person. They knew he's always drawing, he's always doing something. And my dad had a small conversation with me. It was at that point of like choosing new subjects. It was like, where can you do? He goes, have you got enough grades that you can carry on studying? I go, yeah. But this is the field. This is the subjects I want to take. And he basically just sat down and said, is there a career in this? Will you be getting paid and so forth? And pretty much, yeah, Dad, there's a full-on career, that there's progression and so forth. Because that's fine, then go for it. And that for me was enough encouragement from my dad to like, okay, I can really pursue this. And I remember one of the first projects that I did while I was like doing my A levels and so forth was like a photography project, and I did a photo montage scene, and I brought it home, and it's like, oh, Dad, here, look, this is what I worked on today. And it's like, great. He goes, great. And then he goes, can I keep this? And I go, yeah, sure. And it's the first like real encouragement for my dad from that point of view. And it's like he took it with him and like showed his friends and so forth. So it wasn't like a massive gesture, but for me, it meant everything.
Yeah.
That my dad approved of what it was and he wanted to show it off. So it's small things like that was just like, that was enough of a push for me. It's like, I'm doing the right things. And because of that, my grades were just like shot up in comparison, because it was something I'm really interested in.
Yeah, and the passion was behind it.
Yeah.
So then you just said you were doing graphic design and not really drawing, but then you were just drawing for fun. When was it that you then got that kind of, that, I suppose, that feeling inside, or that kind of idea of, do you know what, I want to take this and not just do graphic design, I want to do my own art, I want to draw, I want to make something of this?
This is still very much in the early days. I'm still like, in a sense, learning in a sense.
Yeah.
So 2012, 2013 was the point where it's like, okay, I can draw a little bit better than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
But I want to combine another passion, which was film and cinema. So I set myself the task, being like the designer side. I set myself a brief, and let's draw a movie poster. And I think it was really the height of like the minimalist poster movement. Everyone wanted like a minimalist poster, like
Yeah.
less is more sort of attitude to it. And I started doing a couple, and I shared them in a sense on a blog point of view, and like on Facebook, and it's like, hey, got half a dozen likes, and that for me was enough at that point. Was like, okay, people are liking these, let's draw more of these. So it used to be like, hey, there's a new trailer out, or let's revisit films from yesteryear and like start putting together a story which is like more personal to me and personal to a person that's watched the film,
Yeah.
rather than you're looking for like a teaser poster which is kind of like tries to sum up the whole film in one image. So I started doing that and just started sharing my work online, and then just through the gift of social media and so forth, they started getting picked up by design blogs, and these were like a lot of the blogs I used to read on a daily basis being a designer. And that just, once again, it's that reassurance, like, hey, I'm doing something and people are appreciating it, let's do more of this. And I just carried on doing it from that point of view, all for fun. Just I had a passion for it, so let's start producing art and start doing these fan art movie posters.
So at this point, I remember seeing some of yours for like Batman Begins, Lord of the Rings, Guardians of the Galaxy, where you've done your own take and spin on those posters.
Yeah.
When was it you started to see a massive kind of, not just 6 likes and it getting quite, full on, and the response was growing at quite a rate? Because now obviously you're getting more than 6 likes and your social medias are jumping up massively and you're really making a name for yourself. Is it only the last few years?
I got, like, while I was still doing it in a sense independently and doing it for fun, I got contacted by a studio exec,
Yeah.
and they said, hey, I've been following your work and we really love what you're doing. Would you like to do a poster for a new film that's about to come out? Initially, I thought, okay, this is some sort of prank or joke. My friends are playing on me. So I jumped onto LinkedIn just to check who the person was. And
Yeah.
I remember quite vividly, this was like Saturday morning on the weekend. So they obviously sent it, Friday late from the US, the email. So I contacted him back, had a conversation, and it turns out that the film was Spring Breakers.
Wow.
And over I'd say a 2-week period with a bit of back and forth and conversation, I designed my first official movie poster for him. And it wasn't paid heavily or anything. There was a massive payment to it, but they said, hey, we would like what you do, so you have like more or less freedom from a creative point of view. You can do what you like. There was no likeness and anything else, and to be honest, that worked in my favor, because even though I've only been drawing for a little while, again, it's like I wasn't confident enough to draw people in a sense
Yeah.
from a likeness point of view. So a lot of my early work definitely has no likeness at all, just because, to be honest, I wasn't good enough to draw people, I feel. So that was the first thing I did, and then it was they credited me as an artist. It was up on IMDb and everything else, and I think that's where a lot more people noticed my work. That was kind of my big break from that point
Yeah.
of view. And then it's like I got contacted by the Poster Posse, and they said, hey, we're a collective of just artists and we produce stuff for fun, but we have had interest from studios, so would you like to join? I said, yeah, sure. Still very happy in my day job, counting myself very lucky to have a design in the creative field, but this is like, hey, this is fun and a great hobby to have on the side. So that was where it's like pursued it further, and out of that was born like Guardians of the Galaxy, which James Gunn saw, and that then became the official poster that went along with the deluxe LP of the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So early in those years, and I want to think back, this is probably around 20, bad with dates, but this is still like 2015, 2016,
Yeah.
very, very early in the process. But I'd done a piece for X-Men Days of Future Past. There was Guardians of the Galaxy. Stuff started picking up, and it was smaller projects for TV, or it was these massive Marvel films. But in a very small period of time, I feel my work got picked up, and I got to do official work for the studios.
One of the first times I saw one of your pieces of work was for John Carpenter's The Thing, and there's so many different posters for this film, and it's one of my favorites. But your take on it was very different. We had the dog eye and it, like the map and the whole different feel to it, and it that's when I started to think, who is this guy? And I wanted to check out more and more work, and then I saw more stuff for Ant-Man, and I think it's Spider-Man, and then obviously Brightburn and the standards, so you get the likes of Star Wars, which is always a tough one to do, and Jaws, and you seem to have really kind of done so much in such a short space of time.
Yeah, I think I think I worked tirelessly, in the sense like I used to work evenings and weekends on these posters while I was still working,
Yeah.
and it was towards the end of 2018.
Yeah.
2020, let's see, end of 2017, beginning of 2018. I quit my day job. It got to the point where I couldn't juggle the two jobs anymore.
No.
Family life and everything else. It was a case of I can either, put everything into it and, start being nervous that, okay, it was one of the things like if I do this as my full-time job, it's now I'm putting myself up to fail, because until now it's just been a hobby, and if nothing happens to it, I've got my day job and I'm progressing there, the career's going well. But then it's like, okay, I'm nervous, but it's worth that risk. Let's put
Yeah.
everything into it. I quit my day job, and it was just like after a conversation on the weekend, it was like I went in Monday and had my notice. And then at the beginning of 2018, with my notice period, that was it. I was a freelance artist, and I had to put everything into it. So now, having the gift of time, which I'd never really had before, it was like, let's really, put everything into it. Every minute, like I've structured my day, so it was a 9 to 5 day. But the freedom that gave me to, rather than spending 2 hours or a day on a piece, I could spend 3 days and really make that piece special, and have put as much time as it needed, rather than,
Yeah.
okay, I've got a deadline and that's like I've only got a weekend to do these things. So that's, I think, really where my work flourished even more, and the confidence really built in it.
I mean, that's the confidence to be able to have that ability and strength to think, right, I'm going to quit my job. That whole foundation, security and regular paycheck is now no longer there. It takes some real big balls. And, as a podcaster who is only doing this as a hobby, it's the dream, to have that
Yeah.
confidence and self-belief that you can do it. I mean, I admire you so much for that, but my God, what was it that triggered that? I know you want the time, you want that, but were you just at the point where you're like, I've got to do it now or I never will?
It's funny that I think one of the pieces of mine that really spearheaded that was Wonder Woman, which was 2017. I did this piece which was kind of like fan art for fun, and it blew up overnight. I hate using like the term viral and stuff like that, but at that, for those few weeks, whatever, it was everywhere. I was getting tagged by museums to like PhD history students, like loads of magazines and so forth. Everyone was covering that piece. I think it was one of those perfect storms, because it was one of the first female directed superhero films, female led superhero films.
Yeah.
It was during that era where everyone was becoming a lot more aware of themselves and the world around us, and it's like that piece summed up a lot of those things. And to myself, it was like, I've been drawing pieces like this for the last 4 to 5 years. In my head, it was like, it wasn't a special piece when I was drawing it. It was another piece in the way I draw stuff. In a sense, I'd like to break down a piece in a sense from where it comes from, an era. Is there a backstory can I pull on? Is there more than just what you see on the screen? In my work is generally what I'm trying to aim for. So it was another piece in that style, in that fashion. So when it hit big, it was like, okay, I'm not sure what to exactly do with this. But out of that fan art poster, like I spoke with a gallery and they said, hey, we've got the license, would you like to make this? Within a week's period, we had got the piece signed off, and I had got it ready for screen printing at it, and it had gone on sale, and it did amazing numbers. So off the back of that, it was like, that gave me a foundation, in a
Yeah.
sense, saying, hey, this one piece has done this for me. Worst case scenario, I can always go back to work if this doesn't flourish.
Yeah.
But that was enough to say, hey, I can make a full-on living from this thing. That I knew it was possible anyway, but it was like, that was like the buffer that it gave me, and the confidence. So let's go for it. 2018 can only get better than this.
I mean, we were
So
only talking a couple of years ago, and then I've seen, obviously, you've worked with people like Bottleneck and Vice Press,
yes.
Sean the Dead Print and stuff. And to work with those guys must be an honor. So kind of early into your career, if you know what I mean, as you're now really taking it as your full-time main income and your career. So what's it like to see those releases? I was talking to various artists on this Voice Behind the Artist specials, and I always wonder what it's like when it comes to like a release day, and you have that poster go up, and you just kind of panicking, thinking, God, what happens if they only sell 2 or 3? And it must be like results day as a student. It must be trying to find out, is this going to be good enough? And I can't imagine what it'd be like seeing it going online and hoping that it sells well and people have the reaction that you hope.
Yeah, it is. It's a nerve-wracking day. It's like it's excitement and nervousness at the same time because you've done this piece, and in some cases, you did the piece months ago or 6 months ago. So you're kind of you're removed from the piece itself, because you're always working on the next piece. But then this is the bit where it kind of like is a case when it's getting marked by the teacher. Do the public like it? I can finally show everyone this thing that I created, weeks or months ago. Let's see if everyone likes it as I do. And you never know, it's there's so many factors that can play into that. If it's for a film, has the film done well? Have you create like in some scenarios, is the artwork better than the film, or has something happened that kind of like diminishes the art because of what's going on in the world? Is it the particular day that people are getting paid? Is there something else going on? So there's so many factors, but you're just trying to boil it down. You in your head, you just like, okay, do people like my work or not? And that's where it kind of becomes like you're beating yourself up if you don't do the numbers. If it doesn't sell out in the first 5 minutes, you're really being hard on yourself. Touch wood, my work's generally being received well, and it's been received well enough that it's like, yes, I can carry on doing this. But yeah, it's real nervous day, and it's like as an artist, it's probably the hardest thing because it's like you always say to artists, don't base your work on the amount of likes you get or the
Yeah,
amount of set, that sort of thing. But it's like this is like actually people buying it. They're people, they're putting the money where the mouth is. It's hard not to like beat yourself up if a piece doesn't do well.
yeah, of
Um,
course.
but it's like you just got to keep moving, and it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's one piece, and
Yeah.
in a year I might draw, to be honest, from a commercial point of view, about 60 to 100 pieces. So it's one piece that might not do as well, but there's always another piece that I think will be the better piece.
And there's a lot of good artists out there, and that's what I've really enjoyed doing these podcasts and getting to hear these people. And the community seems like the strongest out there. There's never any kind of rivalry or anyone trying to kind of, you know, have something against anyone else. Every artist I've spoken to is friends with the other artists I've spoken to, and they've helped each other out, and they've sent each other their work and asked for advice or guidance. And it must be amazing to be part of such a really positive, literally anyone will do anything for anyone community.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why my career has progressed so quickly, because very early in the stage is like I got a community that you could bounce ideas off and learn off of,
Yeah,
and even now I'm like a member of a few like private Facebook groups which are for illustrators and artists.
yeah,
On a daily basis, people are like posing questions, or if you found out a new trick how to do something, separate a screen print, or what's the best process for doing certain things, or even like from a commercial point of view, contracts and so forth. Everyone's very eager to help each other, and it's not a case of, okay, if he gets a job, that's a job I lose. It's
yeah,
more of a case of we're all illustrators, and if the industry is moving more towards an illustrative medium, that helps everyone because we all want that thing to keep thriving and keep breathing. So yeah, I think everyone generally is very friendly. There's always minor disputes, but that's people. But as a whole,
yeah.
everyone looks after each other and looks out for each other. And if there's a client out there that doesn't pay you, or they're really bad to work with, we'll let people know. This is what to expect if you're working with someone. But yeah, it's a great community. I've been had the honor to meet a lot of artists during these years, and we've always gotten really well, had a drink together, met up at conventions and so forth, and it's been great.
Was there any of these artists? We mentioned Drew Struzan at the start when you were a kid, only 8 years old, looking at his art on your wall. But was there any kind of guys that you took influence from, or were you kind of heroes when you were making this jump to become a full-time kind of artist?
Yeah, when it was a case of like I knew the art world, and at A level I did some art history, so there's a background from that as well. So not just like pop culture art. So very much heavily influenced, I guess, from there was postmodernism and pop art, because that
Yeah,
was like bringing the world that was around you and bringing it to life in that sense, especially pop art, because it was not necessarily in a sense the biggest events. It could be anything from a soup can to a paintbrush.
yeah,
So that was something like anything can be art in that sense. But when I was looking more in the sense from a pop culture point of view, there was definitely Struzan, of course, because he's just like the godfather. Like I
yeah,
had his art on my wall when I was 8 years old. So there was that tie-in sort of thing when you finally got to see the work over the years of particular artists. But people like Ansel as well. Um, and who are the artists? I mean, Ollie Moss played a big part because during that period when I first kind of like learned what the new pop culture art was and minimalist posters, Ollie was up there on the top of his game.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't necessarily originally know him by name, I knew the work. And there was that like Noma Bar as well. There's clever art from that point of view. Double entendres with your work that you can have one image which is a compound of many images, and it kind of distills the entire movie into one scene. So there's a lot of that.
And with the pieces you do, because there's such a range, obviously, if you go straight onto your website, it's full of all the movies you've done, and there's some classics in there, there's more modern day films. But is this a point now where you're getting to do the art you want, you to do the design, and then you hope that you can use a gallery to sell this through or your own site? Or are your main projects that you do for clients on a day-to-day basis? How's the kind of mix between getting to do your own stuff and then being asked to do stuff?
I would say like this year's is quite an anomaly because not many films have come out from, but on an average year, let's say it's a good 50-50 split in a sense, getting commissioned to do work by studios or TV companies,
Yeah.
and then being able to do my own work from a gallery point of view. They're all like great from each aspect in a sense. The brief stuff is great from a studio point of view because you're working directly with the studio and it's key art in a lot of cases that'll be used in marketing and promotion. But the stuff that's really fun, I guess, from a gallery point of view is because I set my own brief. It's a piece I want to create for me, and I hope it gets signed off because licensing allows that sort of take on it. But that's really stuff which is an open brief to me, so that's the fun stuff I get to play around with. And it's always like my whiteboard behind me has got a column to itself which is just like ideas for me, that stuff
Yeah.
I'll pick up on over time. And this year, from that point of view, like with COVID and lockdown, like the initial few months when it was really quiet, it was like, okay, let's go back to that list and pick up all the ideas that I wished I had time for originally,
Yeah.
and let's start ticking those off. So a lot of the releases I've had this year, and a few which are still saved up for next year, are all the stuff that I've created during that period, which are all like, hey, this is a great idea for a film that I love, and it's my take on it
Yeah.
rather than a studio's brief on it. So they're really rewarding from that point of view because it's very much me thinking of the idea, thinking of the brief, and kind of answering it myself.
And is there a lot of projects that don't see the day in light? I mean, you said they're on a whiteboard and they don't, I suppose with the COVID, as bad as it is, a lot of time is given back to people to be more creative. And, it's this now is probably the best chance to get those projects done. But are there a lot that you start and just abandon because they're just not going the way you want?
Yeah, I think that always happens. It's like there's an idea, and I can either think about that idea for weeks or months at a time, or if I put it down on paper, I can see if it works. And
Yeah.
if it works, great. But in some scenarios, it doesn't work at all. But at least then it's like it's put a full stop behind it, and I can learn from that. The worst thing to do is have an idea and procrastinate about it, and always wonder what it could have been. So in those scenarios, I rather dedicate the time, put it down on paper, if it's going to be something. But sometimes there's always like there's a list of, hey, this is what I did in 2020, but here's a list of stuff that never worked out.
Yeah.
For instance, I worked on the most recent Star Wars film, but I did a piece for that as part of the marketing. But as part of that, I also did 4 additional pieces which haven't been released, and they're very much in a vintage style of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I was really happy with those pieces. I only had a week to do 4 pieces. So it was a massive crunch, and it's like, great, I get to do this. And I don't want to say no to Star Wars, but did those pieces in a week. They got all signed off, but they haven't been used yet. So I'm sitting on these 4 pieces, which I'm really proud of. But I can't show anyone, and I have to wait till the client shows them. And I'm not sure if they'll ever be used, in all honesty. So that's really the hardest thing. You have something created, and then you don't know if people will see it. And especially when you're like quite proud of it as well, is quite hard.
I mean, the Rise of the Skywalker one was amazing. And did you expect the response you got from that online?
It was, yeah, to a degree, because when you're looking at a film of that scale, it's the last of the trilogy and the last of, in a sense, a 9 film
Yeah.
story arc. You're like, everyone's going to love, and this is prior to the film coming out, so you can think of what you want of the film post review and post watching it, but everyone's really hyped for the film going into it, so I know I'll get at least so many eyes on it, and then it's like a percentage of that will like it or not.
Yeah.
For that piece is like I wanted to hark back and look at like the matte paintings from the early films and pay homage to that. That was the idea in my head. So it's always great when people like or have those same connections as you do. You try and base it on emotion or stuff that nostalgia that you think of or plays quite heavily when you think of a particular property, and you hope other people have those same thoughts, and that's what you could try and tap into when creating a piece.
And looking into the future, you are still quite early into your career, but you could never have imagined it to be the kind of response that it has been to now. And the way it blew up and getting your stuff, like, I remember getting a subscriber's edition of, I think it was Empire magazine with Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel, yeah.
I mean, that must be the goal of most kids growing up, to one day be on the front of Empire magazine. Is there a lot more goals that you want to achieve?
Yeah, it's a funny thing because people always ask, "Oh, what property do you want to work for next?" Or what's your next goal? I mean, and I look back and I've been extremely lucky from that point of view. I've got to work with like some really big properties, from Star Wars to Avengers, Marvel and DC properties. And it's like, where can it go now? Empire was, to be honest, a really big bucket list one for me. It was the end of 2018. And I was making my list for 2019 of what do I want to achieve this year. And I put on there Empire magazine. And it was like a week or 2 weeks before Christmas. And I got the email from Chris from Empire, who's the art director, and said, "Hey, would you like to work on a cover?" And I was like, I only wrote this down a week ago that I wish I had it for 2019. And it's just the tail end of 2018 and I get the gig. So things like that, it's just like, I don't know whether you put out positive energy and it comes back to you. But there's always like a list of stuff to do. And one of the big things that I've been able to do this year, which was a massive tick, was I've got to do some comic book covers for Marvel. And as many like film posters that I've done, that was something special because I grew up with comic books and, going to the shops and, and that's not so always buying the comic book, but just there and thumbing through them and looking at the cover art. So that was just like anything that I think which is in a sense like physical media, which you can only really appreciate when you hold it in your hand, like a book cover or a comic book. That was just something really special. So I got to tick that off this year. So going forward, it's like I'm still trying to work out what the list is going to be for 2021. But I got to do some like production work in the last couple of years. So for films that are still very early in the ideas process or in the production process. So I got to do some mood boards and some ideation, like, coming up with ideas and like the visual language of the film. So that's been really rewarding. So I'd love to do more of that, in all honesty, because it's like, it's great doing movie posters and book covers, but they kind of come after the initial creative process is done. Like the film's made and you're reacting to someone else's product. But being involved in the main product itself and shaping that to any degree, it's been really rewarding. So I'd love to do more of that, in all honesty.
And a question I've asked everyone is, I'm wondering, how much time do you get normally to just sit there and enjoy art? And it seems you're quite different in the way that you get to do it and then hope that the galleries or the clients are coming then to you once you've done the design. Whereas some of the artists I've spoken to are literally just given a list of clients that wanting work, they're accepting all these projects and just continuously working and never really getting time for themselves anymore. They never get to sit back and just sketch or just draw and enjoy and be passionate about it. I take it you're in a good place at the moment where you get to still do what you want to do and not just sit there and have deadline after deadline after deadline.
Yeah, I think this year's been great from that point of view. In a sense, there have been deadlines, but there's been massive points within the year. Whereas, like, I'm looking at these self-initiated projects, and it's been great. I can actually like draw and just draw for fun to a degree, but to be honest, there's always the end goal of what that piece is going to be. So I think most of my most recent releases have all been projects that I drew for fun, in all honesty. But the reception's been great, and then they've been turned into official gallery posters because of that. And I think, when you can do something that's, in a sense, just for the passion of it, it really shows in the work, and it's not hampered by any, brief or, what someone else's expectations are of the piece. So yeah, I still get to draw in a sense from like say non-project stuff, but to be honest, there's still a goal that hey, it'll become official. So it's never a drawing in the purest form just for fun. That will never be that in my head. I'll never get used for anything else. It's always like I'm trying to learn how to do a certain process, or I wish this will become an unofficial piece. So I think when I was a kid, it was like, hey, I'm going to draw this because I feel like drawing something.
Yeah.
There's always, I guess, an end goal to what it's going to be, and whether it's just learning and getting better at what I do, learning 3D art as well, which has been something over the last few years. There's a reason for it. It's never 100% just fun, because it's like I'm doing this in most cases 6 days a week. It's hard to turn off from it. You're always thinking of what the next piece could be.
And a lot of artists and graphic designers and people that are wanting to get in, and people that want to get into the industry are listening to these podcasts. And I've seen a lot of people mail me or ask for advice. And what would you say, as someone that is still making a name for themselves but is doing it in a right way, what advice do you give to those people that want to be like you and take that jump and become full-time and as a job do something they love so much and they're so passionate about? Because it's a hard industry to get in, isn't it? It's not easy to make a name for yourself.
Yeah, I think to a degree, I'm very lucky that I picked it up when I did, because how big the pop culture art scene is now, it's just grown and grown over the last, I would say, since I started, which has been probably about 8 years. So I guess it's even more difficult to break in, because so many young artists are producing such amazing work. It's hard to get notoriety or get your work, to have your work stand out from the crowd, I guess. The way I started was very organic. It was never meant to be a career swap or anything else. I just created art, put it out there, and the right people got to see it. And I still think that will work for you, for most artists. If you keep producing work and get better at what you do and share your work out there, tag the right people, to be honest, because the right people notice. There's been many occasions that an art director has seen my work because it's been on Instagram or it's been on a third party portfolio site, because they do look through and try to gain inspiration from seeing the art's
Yeah.
out there. So my advice from that point of view is, yes, be understand what the end goal is, but understand that the journey is just as important as that end goal. You can't kind of fast forward that journey. You need to start getting better, understand the industry, and get your work to a particular level where you will get hired for it. And it's not necessarily, and it can be, from my point of view, is more from a conceptual point of view. I would say my conceptual ideas were better than my art when I initially started, and over the years I've slowly started getting better at the execution side of things. But my work stood out mainly because the concepts were different and bold. So you could either go from that point of view, the ideas are great and the art's getting there, or the art's really good, and that's why it visually stands out. But yeah, just get your art out there, and then there's like you can get reviews from creative directors and so forth. If it's from like a commercial point of view, you want to become an artist, so you want to work in advertising and things like that, or do you want to break into pop culture and so forth? And that point of view, then it's like start talking to the galleries and start tagging the galleries in your work. Because when I started my life from a gallery point of view, it was Botnet Gallery that gave me that first break, in a sense of, hey, we've been liking your work for a while, but we want to find the right property for you. And they do a great job of like really building up an artist over time, picking the right property that works for them, starting the edition size, which isn't too big. So you feel better when it sells out, and then you slowly build upon that momentum. So they're great from that point of view. So I really owe a lot to them for the success that I've had over the last few years, because they've nurtured my talent.
They're a nightmare. It's where all my money goes. Every time I get paid, I'm like, Vice Press, Bottleneck Gallery. Like, I'm the quickest person to try and get on that button when they go live, and all my money goes on this art, and it's a nightmare. But it must be incredible to be involved with them and see your own work up on those sites and see it sell out and have such a big response.
Yeah, it's really rewarding, because you think to yourself, you produce the work and you produce it a lot of the times in isolation. You never always see your work, especially during the early years. I never saw my work outside of like the digital file that I would send off. But definitely in recent years, when people have been sharing my art again and saying, hey, I've framed it, it's up on the wall, or I've gone to galleries, or I've gone to like conventions of so forth, and people are buying the art directly from me. That's really that one-to-one connection that you can have with the person that buys your art is, makes it all worthwhile, because, in isolation it's great, and it's very self-serving from that point of view. But to have someone buy your art, and not just because of your name, or they know who you are, but it's like, hey, I just like this piece and I want it on my wall, and they're willing to give up a bit of their home for
Yeah.
something you produced, is a great feeling. It's very humbling, to be honest, that someone's willing to buy something and put it on their wall for hopefully a year or two at least.
It's a really nice way to look at it, isn't it? It's part of your home's being given up for somebody else, and that's really, I've not always looked at it like that.
Yeah, it's a massive compliment. I think you're willing to have something that someone created and look at it, in a sense, every day.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thing to think of, and it's like just stuff I've dreamt up while sitting here in the studio, and people are willing to buy it in any form. It's always amazing. I never take that for granted. It's never like,
No.
oh great, I'll do this piece and it'll sell out. I never know from that point of view, but I get great messages a lot of the times. Oh, I love that piece, or this piece of yours inspired me to create this piece, and those messages have been great. Especially students. Out of the recent years, I've had a lot of students say, "Hey, could you give me some tips on a piece I'm currently creating?" I've just recently finished like a small time mentorship with a university student, where they've worked on an end of year project, and I got to be the mentor for that piece. So they're super rewarding, things like that, when you can actually give back to the industry in any way.
And obviously, within the industry, quite a lot of people are surprised by how people look, because you artists never really publish anything to do with the way you look. So I noticed that if you ever go on any of you guys' Instagrams, it's all about your artwork and designs. And how do you find the response? Because race and age and all these things people can discriminate against, and it's an industry where people don't always see the person behind the art. And have you encountered any, not abuse, but have you encountered any way of being treated, or again, have you found that people have acted differently, or have you ever tried to hide behind it so people don't judge you?
I think very very early, when I was like in my design career and so forth, I was quite aware of like, okay, I'm an Asian, and even university is like, there. I think in my class, which the first year was like 100 students, there's only 5 people of color in that class. So even without particularly being aware of it, it's like you knew you stood out to a degree.
Yeah.
Even though every person that I've met in design has been great. Um, but I was very happy to, like, in a sense, hide behind the logo and hide
Right.
behind the work, and not put myself out there and try and create any type of notoriety or whatever because of the color of my skin. I wanted the art to speak for itself, and it to really be, that's why people would employ me, or like what I do, is because of the art, not because it's sort of tokenism or
Yeah.
anything like that. I didn't want to feel like if the color of my skin was the reason why I was getting a particular job or my work was being liked. So for many years it was just like, and it just became instilled as like, hey, people are interested in the work, let's put the work out there. Very easily happily, in a sense, hide behind the logo on social media.
Yeah.
But over recent years, it's like, especially like now, becoming whether it's like doing interviews or being at cons and so forth, and just letting people in a little bit more, people
Yeah.
are surprised. I would say in a positive sense. People are surprised. Oh, you're Indian and so forth. Oh, like some people thought I was, the name can throw people whether I was female or not. So occasionally he's like, yeah, this is me. It's like, not that I've been hiding who I am, but I just haven't put it out there necessarily. Especially in an industry where it's like, there's probably a handful of, definitely in the West, in a sense, of people of color who work within the poster art and so forth. So it's been, especially now, everyone's a bit more self-aware, and representation is really important. Not just because of yourself. I mean, I can tell you very small stories. Like I was on my way to the airport, and I caught a taxi, and the taxi driver was talking away, and he's talking about his daughter, and his daughter's really into art. And he's just like, I don't see a future in it, the guy was saying. I was like, okay. I was like, he was dropping me off to the airport, and I was just telling him I'm on my way to LA, and I've got like 13 meetings booked up in a week with all the major studios. I was like, I'm seeing Disney, I'm seeing Pixar, I'm seeing Warner Brothers. And I go, I'm from the same area that you're from, and I'm doing all this. So there's definitely a future in it. So it's great to be able to, like, now kind of step away and step from behind the camera, in a sense, and say, hey, not from a point of just trying, like, no notoriety, but it's like for the future generations, there is a future in it. There is now a precursor for you to see that, there's people that are making it within the industry that are of color and, are from different backgrounds. So it's nice to be able to lend that hand in any way. Anytime that I'm in a con and I see a Asian family or whatever, and it's like they look over and there's like this nice little like nod, like there's an
Yeah.
appreciation that I'm doing something different and I'm doing something. And when the kids come over and they love the art, it's like you always have this conversation of how did you start off, because we understand, especially like the age that I'm at, how hard it is to be one of the first people to in that generation of that family, one who went to university but one chose a creative field, um, rather than becoming a doctor or a barrister or anything like that, the normal conservative subjects. So like, how did you get away with that? And I was like, my parents were supportive. Having two older brothers was great from that point of view. So it's nice to be able to kind of represent from that point of view, just to make it easier for the generations that are growing up.
It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today, and I can't wait to put this episode out. I think people are going to absolutely fall in love with it and then go and check out your work and see the designs and be like, oh shit, I didn't realize that's him, and oh wow, I've got that poster myself and I didn't realize, or the DVD or a certain product with your work on. And I just want to thank you for your time. It really has been an absolute pleasure from start to finish.
No, thank you so much. It's always fun talking about your stuff, and it's occasionally you get to like pause and like self-reflect, so it's great from that point of view.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and Doaly. And as I said at the start of today's interview, what a great guy, what an incredible inspiration, and I loved his stories from start to finish about how he got into art and how he's mastered it. He really is one of the most talented artists in the country, and I urge you to go and check his work out. You'll instantly want to buy the Jaws print, because I did. The Batman Begins print is stunning, and as I mentioned, some of his Spider-Man work is the best out there. He's so good, and I believe he's just getting started. I think he's got so much more to offer, and I can't wait to see where it takes him. The great thing about Doaly as well is he's donated a couple of amazing prints. You can win these by staying tuned on my social media over the next few days. If you jump onto markandme.com, there's links to my Facebook, my Twitter and my Instagram. I'll be posting on all those on how to be in with a chance with winning these beautiful signed artwork prints. Also, the great guys at Vice Press have stepped in. Those guys are so generous and so kind, and they haven't stopped with this. They have a set of the Cornetto Trilogy prints by Doaly himself to give away. These are stunning and will look absolutely amazing framed on your wall. And if you're like me, you'll end up buying more and more prints when visiting their site. They have the best prints out there, and the guys that run the company are absolute legends. So jump on their site, check them out, and spend all your pocket money, because you will not regret it. I'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time, but what I want to do now is just let you know the podcast needs your support more than ever. I do have a Patreon page, and on there you can jump on there and sponsor me for as little as £1 a month. At the moment you're getting 4 episodes a month for that. You're getting an opportunity to win some incredible prizes. You get the opportunity to win some exclusive t-shirts, posters, pins, you name it. I'm doing all I can to give the best prizes I can to those guys that support the podcast. And if you can't do that, well, just jump onto my social media channels and share the episode. It costs nothing and makes a huge difference. Stay tuned, like I said, to my social media channels over the next few days to win some incredible prizes, and I'll be back in a week's time with a brand new episode. So until then, thanks for listening and take care.
Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angel. Lonely as I am, together we cry. Drive on the streets 'cause she's my companion. I walk through the hills 'cause she knows who I am. She's She kisses me windy, and I never worry. Now that is a lie. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard to believe that there's nobody out there. It's hard to believe that I'm all alone. At least I have her love to see that she loves me. Lonely as I am, together we cry. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place I love. Take me all the way. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. Take me to the place